Hey guys, welcome back into the record room. And I know I say this every episode, but thank you to each and every one of you out there that has recently subscribed, liked, commented on a video. We are now at the 500 subscriber mark, which is something I genuinely never thought I would hit. I never thought people would like to watch or listen to me talk about records as much as I like talking about records. So thank you so much. And if you haven't already hit the subscribe button, go ahead. That way you'll never miss a video. And we've got tons of stuff, tons of fun stuff planned right here on the record room. Now, the record room itself actually doubles as my workspace, my work office, and I spend pretty much every day here, 5 days a week working, and then time at the weekend as well. And the other day I was sitting around and just, kind of gazing and marveling at all the records I have in my collection. And some friends of mine have recently been mentioning that they were looking to downsize, not completely eradicate their collections, but just, downsize. And I'm looking around and it got me to thinking, well, if I were to ever do that, which I do actually have no intention of doing right now, how would I go about it? What would be the thing to do? Would it be to pull out albums I didn't want, or would it be to pull out albums I wanted to keep and then create kind of a different collection that way? And it got me to thinking about the albums that I love and have a connection with. And at the time, I was actually listening to the Stone Temple Pilots debut album, Core, which when that album came out, early 90s, I wouldn't say I was an all-in, fully blown rock alternative metal music fan. I did enjoy a lot of the newer bands that were coming along, but I was still I still very much had my foot into pop music and hip hop. I liked a lot of early 90s hip hop, late 80s, early 90s, that kind of thing. And while I was listening to this album, I thought, well, this is definitely going to have to be on the list, because I remember the first time I saw Stone Temple Pilots, it was on the Top of the Pops TV show here in the UK, and they played the song Plush, and I was just blown away by this song. It was so great. Scott Weiland's vocals were just so good. I thought, wow. Yeah, even back then, I became a fan of Stone Temple Pilots. And at the time, I did buy the Core album, but I bought it on CD, like most people did. So years later, I went and bought a vinyl copy, but I didn't buy an original pressing, because the original pressing of that album is a single disc, and the album is fairly long, so there is a lot of information packed onto a single disc, which can lead to not the best sound quality. So the version I went for, and this is my first pick on the records I would keep. And what I plan to do with this is I'm not going to say I'm going to turn it into a series, but every now and again there's going to be a bunch of albums that I would definitely keep if I were thinning down my collection. And Stone Temple Pilots Core is definitely one of them, as I just mentioned. And the version I have here, this is the Musicon vinyl, 180 gram audiophile vinyl pressing. Now, I'm not sure what makes it an audiophile vinyl pressing. If it's just the record weight, literally doesn't mean anything. But the reason I went for this version is because the album is actually split over 3 sides, so the tracks have plenty of room to breathe. The fourth side itself is actually an etching, so don't play that side, but it's a pretty cool etching. I'll try and, I don't know if it's going to pick up on camera or not, but there you go. You can kind of see it there. It's the front cover of the album, essentially. It's card 33, and from what I remember, because I haven't actually played this version, I was actually streaming the album the other day when I was working. From what I remember, it sounds pretty good, and at the time, I did look at picking up an original, but I just thought, it's not a cheap album to pick up. And given that it is just a single disc, and a lot of those kind of 90s pressings, I mean, when did this originally come out? Does it say here? 1992. Like around that time, vinyl was kind of on its way out, and so the vinyl pressings weren't the greatest, I will say that. But this version here, this is from 2013, so even this is, what, 11 years old now. But this is still fairly reasonable to find. It's a very bog standard package. It's just just a double wide cardboard sleeve. There's no insert or anything like that. And you get the album on 2 slabs of black vinyl, and it sounds great. You know, like I said, from what I remember, it does sound really, really good. I will be kind of diving back into this and taking a listen to this one very shortly, but it's definitely an album I go back to time and time again. I am a fan of the Stone Temple Pilots. I have no shame in admitting that. I know some people over the, I don't know, there seemed to be this thing about, you know, kind of knocking Stone Temple Pilots for some reason. I don't know why. I think Core is great. I think Purple is amazing. I think Tiny Music is good. I think Volume 4 is good. I think Shangri-La-Di-Da is good. And I managed to actually see Stone Temple Pilots with Scott Weiland before he passed as well. And they were a fantastic live band. So all Stone Temple Pilots is good in my eyes, but Core is definitely an album that I would, if I had to thin down my collection, if I really had to, that is definitely an album that I would keep with me. And the theme, the rest of these albums, is early 90s alternative, because that's when my music taste started to change as the music taste of the world actually started to change. And one of the bands that kind of kicked off that big change was the band Nirvana, obviously with their breakthrough album Nevermind. Before that we had Bleach, which is a fantastic album. Nevermind is an insanely good album, but if I had to pick one Nirvana album to keep, not that I would actually pick, I would just take all of them because there are no bad Nirvana records, but if I had to pick one, my favorite album is definitely In Utero. Now, I've In Utero a couple of different ways, and for the longest time, I did enjoy the 2013 Steve Albini mix. Now, this one here is, it's cut at 45, so it sounds really good, and I do like this mix, I do. However, if I had to keep one version of this album, it wouldn't actually be this version. No, it would actually be the latest version of this album, because I don't have an OG. I don't know if the OG sounds better. I'm sure it probably does, but it's a really expensive album and I can't afford it, so I don't have one right now. But this version here, this is from the recently released In Utero Anniversary box set. And although the album is a single disc, In Utero is a single disc LP, what's great is this is actually a gatefold version. Very nice gatefold. And the reason I like this version is because, I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes I'll listen to an album and I'll get to the end and I just want a little bit more. Not a lot, just a little bit more. And what's great about this set is you do get an additional disc that has the bonus tracks and the B-sides from the singles released from the album. So there is MV, I Hate Myself and I Want to Die, Marigold as well, which is sung by Dave Grohl. And there's also some live tracks on the other side. And, you know, Nirvana were an insanely good band live. Unfortunately, never had the chance, never had the opportunity to see them live. But I have many live albums released by them in officially, unofficially, whatever you want to call it. And I've always enjoyed Nirvana's music live. But In Utero to me is literally the most perfect album Nirvana ever did. The songs are just absolutely fantastic. Serve the Servants has that just killer groove. It's almost 60s-esque, and it's, you know, it's kind of pop sensibilities. And a lot of Cars music had that. It was very pop, but, you know, kind of wrapped up behind, you know, fuzzy guitars. So I would definitely grab a copy of In Utero to take with me in my fictional thinning down of my collection. I would have a copy of In Utero, and this would be the copy that I go for. So this one here, just because it has the album, the B-sides, and some live stuff as well. And of course, there are many bands from the Seattle area all around that time that came out popping off doing this, that, and the other. And Pearl Jam became very famous very quickly on their debut album 10, which I do have an OG copy of, and it sounds great. I'm a very big fan of the 10 album. In fact, the first 3 Pearl Jam albums I think are virtually flawless. Vitology has some moments that I'm not massively a fan of, but then, you know, you hit a track like Better Man and you're just like, oh yeah, that's silly me. And I do love all of the tracks on 10, but it wasn't until Pearl Jam released their second album, Versus, that I really, really became a fan. And it wasn't, I think the first single from the album was Go or Animal, but it wasn't until they released the single for Daughter, which is basically kind of like it's kind of a thinned out acoustic track. You know, there's more going on. It's not just an acoustic track, but it's just such a great song, and the lyrics and just Eddie's voice is just absolutely fantastic. So for me, I would go for Versus over 10 or Vitology. And, you know, Pearl Jam have released some great albums since those original ones, but for me, my fandom for Pearl Jam lies in the earlier days. And the version I have here, again, this is another 180 gram audiophile pressing, and I don't know what, if it's just the weight, that does not an audiophile pressing make. It's just the vinyl weight. So for those people that don't know, so let me lay some science on you. Record weight essentially is irrelevant. Yes, when a record is heavier, the grooves can be cut deeper, and that can lead to better playback. But there are a lot of variables into making that work, and 180 gram doesn't always mean it's going to sound the best. I have literal records that are like 90 gram and they sound fantastic. They are very thin, very flimsy, made back in the 70s and 80s when people knew how to press records, and they just sound fantastic. But this version here of Pearl Jam's Versus, this is from a while back. Let's see if I can read. 2011, maybe, this version. I mean, it's a really nice gatefold, kind of like the Stoughton tip-on style sleeve. Really, really nice. I didn't have this on vinyl when it first came out. I get a lot of these records I actually bought on CD at the time, because CDs were just, I'm not going to say CDs were the thing, because, you know, they were, but CDs were just more convenient as well. You know, you could throw a CD in the car as well, so you could listen to it at home on a CD Walkman. It was just convenient. And even though I never stopped buying records, there were certain albums I did buy on CD. But this one here, it's a legacy recording, which normally they are a bit duff. I would say this is probably from a digital master if I didn't know better, but it does sound pretty good. And, you know, rear view mirror, leash, Go, Animal, Daughter, Glorified G, just so many great songs, and I have so many great memories of this album as well. And just the opening groove of Go, just it is brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. So Pearl Jam's second album, Versus, would definitely be one that I would be pulling off the shelf if I had to thin the herd. And I have no intention of thinning the herd, ever. Maybe one day. I don't know. If you have recently thinned the herd, or you're thinking about cutting down your collection, let me know what some of your selections would be. I primarily have picked a bunch of albums from the early 90s because I'm a product of the early 90s. I am now in my mid-40s, so when I was young and coming up and angry and angsty and wanted my own music, this is the music that was for me. Music for the what is the project he said? Music for the jilted generation. That's kind of my wheelhouse. If I ever have to go to any kind of like comfort music, it's early 90s alt rock, and I'm cool with that. And one of the greatest bands to come out of the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, has to be the Smashing Pumpkins. Now, say what you like about this band, say what you like about Billy Corgan. I care not for the personalities behind a lot of these bands. I'm here for the music. I am always here for the music, and I always will be. And this is actually a recent reissue of Siamese Dream, and as you can tell, it's got a foil cover, so it's bouncing lights off like you wouldn't believe. But this album is just, It's almost like the best of the Smashing Pumpkins. Seriously, it's Today, Disarm, Cherub Rock, all on one album. All on one album. Smashing Pumpkins' Siamese Dream, one of the most influential albums of the 90s, remastered and reissued for the first time on 180 gram vinyl. Seems to be a bit of a trend here with reissuing albums on 180 gram vinyl, like that is the greatest thing in the world. It's not. Anyway, this is really nice though. When did this version come out? So it says here 2011, and maybe this did come out in 2011. I only picked this up recently because my local record store managed to get hold of some copies of it. So this could actually well be from 2011. I have no clue, but it's one of those records that I wanted in my collection for a while. An original copy was just any of this stuff from the early 90s. It's so crazy expensive. It is it's very hard to warrant the cost, especially when you can find a nice sounding reissue for a fraction of the money. And you know, it's got the foil sleeve, it's beautifully presented, and this one has been on heavy rotation for a while, and I can honestly say, hand to God, this one sounds great on my system. I mean, yes, I do have what some people might consider an audiophile setup or an expensive stereo system. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as a stereo that makes music sound good, and I can listen to 90% of the records in my collection and they'll sound good. Yes, there are some that are just pressed badly. There is no getting around that. But for me, everything I've talked about so far, it all sounds good. And yeah, I would not be without these records. And as I mentioned at the start of this episode, in the early 90s, I wasn't fully committed to alternative rock, metal. I was starting to get there. A few of my friends from high school, they were there and I was kind of getting there. I was a little bit behind them. And I found that grunge, alternative, that was a good gateway for me, rather than going straight into, you know, your Slayer, Metallica, Pantera, which all came much later. And I now have, you know, so much love and reverence for those bands and those records from the 90s. For me, I went down, I'm not going to say a slower route, but I took my time with it. And I found that going in through sort of the grunge alternative bands was a good gateway, because there was a lot of songs on a lot of those albums that weren't, you know, hitting you over the head with a sledgehammer. They were great, well-composed songs, and there was thought and there was meaning behind the lyrics. And I really got into that. And the very, very first alternative rock album I ever purchased with my own money was Alice in Chains' Jar of Flies and Sap. And this is an original purchase. This is an original pressing. I know this has been reissued a couple of times, but you can see, like, I've got some spine wear here. This is a well-loved and well-played record. I remember when I first got this, I was expecting something maybe a little bit heavier. And I won't say that I was disappointed at all, because I wasn't disappointed. I remember listening to Jar of Flies and thinking, well, there's nothing really heavy on this, but there's something about it. Why did I kept going back to it. And it took me a while to just figure out that it's amazing. This is just an amazing, amazing record. And then the EP Jar of Flies, sorry, the EP Sap. So Jar of Flies Sap, for those that don't know, is kind of like a mini LP and an EP. There are 7 songs on Jar of Flies. 1, 2, 3, and 4 on Sap. And it's just, you know, I go to this record a lot, and I know people are kind of, you know, with older pressings, like, oh no, you should keep those, you know, get a reissue. But I don't. My most expensive records get played, because for me, it's not about the money. It's about what's in the records, what's on the records. And I will say this now, I did keep this in the original sleeves. I probably will update those. But there you go. It does come on coloured vinyl. So that is Jar of Flies. And I remember this was supposed to be, it even says it on the front, specially priced limited edition double mini album on coloured vinyl. But I bought this from a literal mom and pop record shop, and they just charged me for a double album. But I didn't care at the time. I just wanted to have it. And so Jar of Flies is on blue vinyl, and Jar of Flies is on orange vinyl, and Sap is on blue vinyl. I will get there one day with this. And what's cool is this is actually an etched disc as well, in the same way that the Stone Temple Pilots was. But this one here, you kind of get the Alice in Chains logo and some, I don't know, tribal stuff on there. But again, it sounds fantastic. These are albums, these are records, this is music I have gone back to time and time again over the past 30 years. God. 30 years, man, I am old. And I don't think this music will ever go away from me. You know, even if I'm in the car or I'm listening to, or I'm working and I don't have the time to keep getting up and switching sides and things like that, I will still throw on this music digitally because it means so much to me. So from the perspective of, if I really had to thin down, like gun to head, if I had to thin down, I would definitely start with these 5 albums, and maybe I will do some more in this series where I'll look at some you know, metal albums and some pop albums and some hip hop albums and jazz albums and soul albums. If you would like to see more of that kind of content, let me know in the comments down below. And also, what were you listening to in the early 90s? Do you have any of these records? And what are your memories that you can share with us? Please leave me a comment down below. And remember, you can follow us on social media at Record Room Show. We are on Twitter, and we are on Facebook, and we are on Instagram. But to be honest, I only really post on Instagram, and the best way to reach out to me is just through YouTube, because I read all of the comments, and I'm tremendously grateful for all of you that leave them. So thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll be back with you real soon.